So I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty frustrated today. I guess, like some of them say, some days you just need to take the black pill instead of the red or the blue. Um, but I think it's important that we start at the beginning so that you can better understand just who Jeffrey Epstein is. Um, so, yeah, bear with me for a moment. Okay, welcome back to the show, everybody. I think we need to start at the beginning with understanding who Jeffrey Epstein is and a little backstory that goes back even a little further than him so that you can connect the dots and better see the bigger picture of what's going on here. Um, First and foremost, I want to say that everyone who's calling on Pam Bondi to be replaced or fired, or putting down Cash Patel and Dan, I think they're all doing a phenomenal job. And their traditional role is cleaning up crime and not engaging in domestic weaponization. And I think that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're simply following orders here. Um, Now, as for Trump's response, I don't know about that, but I digress. So I think the main point I want you to be able to understand here is we really no longer have to worry about whether our own FBI is setting us up. I think it was a constant shadow over Christopher Wray under Trump. Um, One obviously for the FBI for, like 60 years practically. Um, they've done that with very few friends on the inside, given how outnumbered they are by rank, um, the FBI rank and file. I think an intense desire from the MAGA base has always been to have accountability for past FBI um, malfeasance beyond simply doing the job of federal law enforcement. And so it's been a very heavy burden, I think, on senior management for things that are not going, you know, uh, a little bit above and beyond what the typical day to day duties of the job entails. I have long believed that the Epstein story is so much more of an FBI story as it is a DOJ and a CIA story, as well as international networks that have been talked about. Um, when the initial claims of Dan and Cash first came out, my thought process was, well, you're not going to find anything at the FBI layer, um, because it was all a CIA thing to begin with. So you're going to have it shielded from the FBI, so that it doesn't give a predicate for DOJ action. But DOJ was the holder of all the intel and all the intel interagency chatter, the interagency cables, the interagency dialogue. So what we're hearing from the news last night, night before, it's much more serious um, and final, in opinion. And coming from Pam Bondi, it made it sound very resolute, like it's done. Now, I still have questions about exactly how official this is, to be frank, because Axios evidently got the exclusive on this. And they posted what looked like an official DOJ document with the news story that was published. But then within a few hours, the official document was a missing link. And I know that folks like Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch had been actively FOIAing um, the Department of Justice for these documents for months, if not years. And I know that Tom Fitton has felt a little bit stabbed in the back and feels like Axios was given an exclusive for things that should have been responded to in a FOIA request from the Judicial Watch. Um, I mean, like, as we can get to all of that in a minute, but I think the direct point here really is about whether or not Epstein did or didn't belong to intelligence. And this is one of these unanswered questions that remains very much a slap in the face, in my opinion. I think that to understand the Epstein story, we need to go back to the 1980s, um, at least as far back as the 2008 case for Epstein, when he was arrested the first time. And that was one of the strangest plea deals in FBI or DOJ history. Um, so just let me explain a little bit about that. The plea deal for Jeffrey Epstein was struck by a man named Alex Acosta, and he was the Miami DOJ before the FBI even finished their investigation. So they rushed the plea deal, which effectively got Jeffrey Epstein off. But even before they got the most relevant evidence, the plea deal was struck. So that in and of itself was very odd. And at the time that the subpoena for Jeffrey Epstein's hard drives and computers, and defense counsel had been fighting that in court, right? Like none of that stuff had came in yet before the plea deal was made with Epstein. And none of that makes any sense. So they struck the plea deal before they even got the computers, essentially. In fact, the lead prosecutor in the case, her name was Maria Bafana, if I can get it out of my mouth. And she bitterly fought with Alex Acosta on this plea deal. She was the lead prosecutor on the case. And there's email traffic with senior lieutenants at the DOJ that say, and I'm quoting, why are you meeting with defense counsel in private? Um, how can you attempt to strike a plea deal before we've even concluded our investigation? We're still finding witnesses. We still don't even have most of the key evidence because the defense counsel are refusing to turn over the hard drives and the computers. How can we make a plea deal when you don't even know what's on their computers? This is outrageous. And then she was basically run over. Um, so, according to some of this email traffic from her conversations with the DOJ lieutenants that came out in a 350-page DOJ Office of Professional Responsibility report that was made later, she basically was threatened for speaking up. And then it turned out that Alex Acosta, who was the top dog, as mentioned, for 11 months, was basically an entire year's worth of emails, incoming emails to Alex Acosta that mysteriously disappeared. Much like Hillary Clinton's 30,000 plus emails, which Trump also ran on the promise of putting her in jail. So, put a pin in that because something is afoot. But the Justice Department moved to look at them, and they were just gone. They were like totally gone. I mean, like when Operation Crossfire Hurricane happened, and then suddenly all the text messages and the email were all gone. It all died at the FBI. So once again, the FBI is, where the evidence goes to die. And just like system migration, or server migration, um, ends up eating all the inside evidence. And that's what happened with Crossfire Hurricane. They did it with Jeffrey Epstein, and no one can explain it. So no one's attempted to retrieve these emails from there. Much like every time, that a server is being migrated at the DOJ, someone did some really nasty fuckery, for lack of a better word. And the fact is that the whole process has been so shady that, and it's high profile too, right? So shady and so high profile. And so now for so long, yeah, I don't know what they're expecting really at the Trump DOJ level, because this is going to be a long term investigation, in my opinion. And obviously, because Jeffrey Epstein was such a really nasty figure, of course, things can be made up about him. Stories can be made up, and there's no basis for a lot of those things in reality. But there are a lot of people who are believing the conspiracies, and there are a lot of people like myself who did some research, who did the digging, that turned over evidence, states evidence to the right people that knows, like we're in the know. We know that this happened. We know that it's real. And so I don't understand. I understand that, like, there's this scale of conspiracy theories around Epstein that kind of puts the PR side of law enforcement in a bind. I get that, right? And they want to be responsive to the facts of the case. And I get that and I respect that. They don't want to be responsive to public opinion or scuttlebutt or conspiracy theories. Okay. But we know that this client list is not conspiracy theories. So mm, that part really puts a bug in my butt. The issue here is that if they don't show their work, if they don't show us what they've looked at in order to come to this conclusion, to make this decision, then we still can't trust their work either. We can't trust their work any more than we could trust the old FBI's work or the old DOJ's work. You see, we can't trust their work and we can't trust their words. Um, I think we're all in alignment here now that we're from the show me state. We want to see the proof, right? Because trust is gone. Uh, so here we are, 6 months in to the Trump administration. It's been half a year. This has been a major campaign issue that, um, Trump ran on. Many people have talked about, Bongino, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, even Matt Gaetz. I mean, like, all of them ran on this premise of transparency and, rounding up the bad guys, right? And granted, they have rounded up some bad guys, but not the ones we've been waiting for since 2015, at least. Okay, just to be fair, we have to look at both sides of this. So, and from the CIA's side of this, like, what have we seen from the CIA side? And that's what we need to think about right now. Okay, because I'm feeling like the CIA is much bigger than the DOJ or the FBI. And I'm getting to that. So bear with me because I know I'm kind of all over the place with this, but there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack in this. Okay, so meanwhile, in all of the Trump world that sort of touches the Epstein world from strange angles, that's the part we need to look at. And that's going to be another topic that I cover here in just a little bit. Um, to get back to Epstein on being an intelligence asset in some respect, I think undeniably the answer to that is a resounding yes. And the fact that we have really seen no attempt, or at least good faith attempts, to even humor the American people in getting a true answer on that is troubling. Um, I mean, what did DOJ query from the CIA on this? You know, have they asked any questions? They're going to come out with this conclusory statement about there's no anything. Okay, well, what did you ask John Radcliffe? What queries did you put out to the CIA's end of the system? At least allow us, the American people, to be the ones to be able to make the excuses for you that you got stonewalled, or that, nothing was really there because we know what you saw. But there's not been any of that. There's not been any transparency on any of these inquiries that has resulted in their conclusion on this. It's just a blatant statement, and we're just supposed to accept it and don't dare ask a question. That's how I felt like Trump reacted today in the cabinet meeting. Don't dare even ask a question on it. Just trust us. And that's not what he built this campaign on. And this is not what he won the presidency on. He won it on promising transparency and arrests. So, why top down edicts without any support or excuse me, any sort of accompanying set of data dumps? Where's our WikiLeaks? Where's our Twitter files? Why do we get more transparency from Elon Musk taking over a private company in terms of federal government documents and emails than we get from our own democratically elected government? That's a valid question. I mean, why would Jeffrey Epstein kill himself if he's innocent? Of course, I mean, what they're saying is that, he didn't, that he killed himself, and there's absolutely no evidence to suggest otherwise. But the footage that they've released to us is not even of his cell block. So, again, we're supposed to just take your word for it. And I can't help but recall in my memory watching Cash Patel and Bongino sit in that news interview and say that he did, in fact, take his own life and that we were all wrong. Because, in my opinion, Bongino looked like he was terrified to even say that out loud because he knew it was a lie and he knew we wouldn't buy it. So, all of this stinks, in my opinion. Um, and again, I apologize for kind of digressing and being all over the place, but it's a lot to unpack. And my brain has a lot of information that I'm trying to relay to you as orderly as possible. But this is really boggling my mind. There's something stinks in this whole thing, right? I smell a rat, a big rat. Um, so yeah, the feds are telling us that he did in fact off himself, and that there's nothing else to look at there, and that's not the case. We know that that's not the case. Um, and even though we found him guilty already of sex trafficking, and Ghislaine Maxwell also was found guilty of sex trafficking, there's no case, there's no clients. Right. I mean, come on. We're not idiots. So the main problem that I have with all of this is that it's like it was entirely created, right? Fabricated. It seems like the deep state, or like whatever terminology you want to use for it, it seems like they're trying to pull one over on us once again, right? Everything from the binder release that Bondi did that had redacted information in it that basically was already public knowledge. Um, I mean, it's just like they're spitting in our face, really. And that's a real insult to me. I feel like we're being spit on. I feel like we're being slapped in the face. Um, because we're smarter than that, right? And it all seems to be very concocted. And perhaps it's a ploy. Perhaps it's a ploy to embarrass the Trump administration and to erode the trust um, in his camp, his people, his supporters, you know, those of us who thought that we'd actually see something here. I'll give them that. Perhaps it's that. But whoever leaked this memo to Axios, who's the left wing media group that broke this um, statement that's not even dated or signed by anybody, keep that in mind. Um, yeah, I don't know. It insults us, and it just makes us feel like all over again. In my opinion, it makes us feel like we just we can't trust them. We can't trust any of them. It's been, bungle after bungle, and it's frustrating. And so this gets me to the question of, was this actually, was Axios actually given um, some sort of rogue insiders, like an employee's tips or something, right? Um, because I mean, it didn't name the source, right? A- And you got to question those kind of things. It didn't name the source. And it's not like this person was made a hero from it, So I find it a little hard to believe that Axios would have voluntarily gotten this exclusive. I mean, they didn't get any statements on record from DOJ officials about it. And that, in and of itself, suggests to me that it was probably a leak. Now, why they're not talking about it being a leak, I don't know. But if the DOJ really wanted to give them the exclusive and they were proud and stood behind their work on this, okay, fine. You would typically see quotes from DOJ's officials, cooperating or providing additional color beyond what was published. And there was none of that, which leads me to believe that it was probably a leak. But, and I don't just come back to this point, I don't know what they're expecting in terms of the basis feelings about this, but Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019, and this was a campaign issue for Donald Trump in 2024. It'll again be a campaign issue in 28, and it will again be a campaign issue in 2032. Um, so it's a very, very strange sequence of events where, like, as dark and as wide as the networks are around Epstein, we see our federal government constantly losing the kind of evidence that would never lose if they were prosecuting us. Let's just be honest. I mean, if this was evidence that they had on you or me, the average citizen, forget about it. It would have been triplicate, copied in triplicate, downloaded to hard drive, the whole 9 yards, right? To make sure that none of it got away. I mean, this just doesn't make sense to me. So, all right, let me just recalibrate here a minute, and let's back up a little bit to the CIA. Because I feel like the CIA has a skeleton here, or excuse me, a skeleton key. Okay. Um, so we're starting to see what we've covered, and then I'll trace it into like a wider web here. All right. In 2008, the sweetheart deal that was made with Epstein was struck over the objections of the FBI. Duly noted. The DOJ basically reached into the case when they met directly with the defense, and that would be the defense lawyers for Epstein, who were basically the highest paid defense lawyers that you could buy, right? Many of them had personal relations with the prosecutors, even. One of the defense counsels had dated one of the DOJ officials. Okay, so we've got bed partners again, much like Struck and that whole deal. And then like they all sort of had personal connections, right? So when Alex Acosta was being interviewed by the White House, the transition team in 2016 for the 2017 cabinet level role. Alex Acosta went from being the Jeffrey Epstein deal negotiator to the guy who overrode the FBI to give this sweetheart deal to Epstein, right? Another kind of strange place in the US government um, is the Department of Labor. Okay, and we need to think about that for a minute too, because the Department of Labor is the place for like unions and basically organized crime, right? Mobs, think mafia. organized crime, and unions. They moved together like peanut butter and jelly. And Alex Acosta had also been the dean of a law school for Florida International University, which is the major CIA recruiting hub. And so folks like Juan Guido, for example, who was the CIA backed candidate for Venezuela, um, is now at FIU. And FIU is very famous, again, for recruiting um, CIA operatives for Latin America, for example. Okay. And so these people were also close to where Jeffrey Epstein had lived when he lived in South Florida. All right. So there's connections everywhere. And Jeffrey Epstein ran with those same Latin American CIA networks. And I should also note that Jeffrey Epstein was working with, what's his name? Adnan Koshi, I think is his name, Adnan Koshi, who was the CIA backed weapons dealer for the Iran Contra affair. So also ties with the Bush family and the Saudis, the Saudi royal family, which is the Bin Ladens, who again I personally have met some of because all of it's connected, and that's why I'm in this, and it's personal to me because I've known some of these things from the opposite angle of these people I'm talking about. But Jeffrey Epstein also had connections with Iran Contra and the CIA gun running and drug running operations from the early 1980s, as did Bill Clinton and the Bushes. So, 1985, Jeffrey Epstein effectively took over from where Arthur Shapiro had left off, and Arthur Shapiro, big name Shapiro. They're all attorneys, but this particular Shapiro was a tax attorney for Les Wexner. And Les Wexner is the billionaire who was the head of limited brands like Victoria's Secret. Okay. And at one point, this was like the largest retail chain in America. And Jeffrey Epstein, after Arthur Shapiro, the tax lawyer for Wexner, was gunned down in a Chicago land style mafia murder in Columbus, Ohio, in 1985, the day before he was set to testify to a grand jury about IRS accounting, which is a whole different story. Um, then that day, he'd been dogged by the IRS, and like this was like a 7-year thing. So the day before he was set to testify, he was mysteriously murdered. Okay, and it was at that point that Jeffrey Epstein was appeared in the picture and began to effectively work his way up to getting the power of attorney over the entire Epstein estate, and then mysteriously went on to manage billions or hundreds of millions of dollars um, for the Wexner network. Okay, because he was tapped to take his place. He was groomed, basically, is what I'm trying to get to. And even more directly in the intelligence adjacent type of work. So he was involved in negotiations of like the relocation of the Iran Contra CIA run airline company, the Continental Air Services, Air America. Um, that was a CIA proprietary airlines that was located in Miami, Florida, and closed up shortly after the Iran Contra scandal was exposed in the 80s. And then it was moved to Columbus, Ohio, which was the hometown of Lex Wexner. Um, so that moved the CIA proprietary airline, and that was all negotiated by Jeffrey Epstein. So, like, what kind of a process could you and I get to do that sort of thing, right? how does one end up in that position? Um, to do economic development for Columbus, Ohio, because they moved it to the Rickenbacker Air Force Base in order to basically like give Wexner retail brand access to the markets in Hong Kong and faraway places like that. And Hong Kong is another one of these, very frequent black market CIA type traffic zone. So Hong Kong was taken over by the British through opium wars, and became a major narcotics trafficking zone through there long ago. But it's all connected, right? And Iran Contra has a lot to do with all of that because it was weapons, and it was drugs, and it was all kinds of things. And uh, Bill Clinton, when he was the governor of Arkansas, even used the airport hubs there for parts of this. It's all connected. But this Adnan uh, Kosheba dude, however you say his name, he was CIA backed, and he was the gun runner for all of that. Um, and us being like normal civilians, we would have never, like Jeffrey Epstein, right? Like we'd have never ended up in a position like that. They tapped him on purpose. And so like all these people, they have the connections to both the Bill Clinton machine and the Donald Trump machine. Okay, take that how you want. Um, but I mean, um, eh, yeah, okay, settle down, please. So Epstein really became the guy that took over, right? But we need to go back to like the 1990s for a moment again, because he also became the money bundler for Bill Clinton in the 90s. He was flying around the world with Clinton. And um, the fact of the matter here is that, like, Epstein's adjacencies to all of these intelligence nodes, combined with the head of the DOJ officially saying that he was told to back off from the Epstein stuff because he belonged to intelligence, that it's above his pay grade, you know, and then, like, back to the Acosta story here, Alex Acosta was then questioned about this when I think it was the Daily Beast that reported this, um, that he told the transition team that Alex Acosta's response to being questioned about that intelligence statement was very curious. And he didn't deny it because he was asked about it publicly. So he said, and I'm going to quote, "I'm not allowed to talk about that. There are DOJ rules, with ethics rules um, about what I'm allowed to say publicly. But, a lot of people are taking what I said out of context and going down rabbit holes. But I'm not allowed to either confirm or deny." Now, why would you not be able to deny if that was not the case? Seems strange, right? And that was over 10 years before he was questioned about that in 2019. The case had already been closed. The settlement had already been reached. It actually been 11 years. Um, so I don't know. It was something that if it was fully untrue, there's no reason that you can't just say, yeah, no, he didn't. You know, he was not a CIA asset or an asset of another foreign government. But the fact is, we don't even know who Alex Acosta talked to. Um, so, like the final wrap on this is that the official story is that in 2020, the Justice Department, responding to the heat of Alex Acosta's affair, um, there was a 350-page written report that I mentioned earlier. Now, we know that there's like an 11-month data gap in Acosta's emails, okay? Um, out of all those 350 pages in that written report, there's only one footnote, okay? Like, this is all we've gotten in 6 years since Epstein did or did not kill himself about this CIA connection. One footnote in a 350-page document that said from the DOJ, and now this was Bill Barr's DOJ. Bill Barr spent the first 7 years of his career. Let me just tell you this too. He spent the first 7 years of his career in the CIA. Okay. He was referred to as the CIA's mop up man, right? He was a cleaner. And even in the Washington Post, you can look this up. Like, this is not conspiracy. I'm not making things up. So he was the mop up man, right? And the Washington Post actually wrote a piece covering his role in covering up the Iran Contra affair. Okay. That was his role. That was the CIA's role. Cover it up, clean it up, shut it up. And we get one footnote in this 350-page report that Bill Barr provides. We asked Acosta about whether or not there was truth to a Daily Beast reporting. It was a Daily Beast. Daily Beast reporting about Jeffrey Epstein being potentially an intelligence asset for helping the FBI on a related white-collar financial crime investigation. And Acosta said, or no. We asked him if he had knowledge about that, and he said no. Acosta said no, and that we offered Acosta a classified briefing room if he had more to say, and he had nothing more to say. Now, that gives you absolutely nothing, right? First of all, very softball question of the century. Do you have any knowledge about Epstein being a known intelligence asset in an unrelated white collar financial crime investigation? Right? So, if we're going to ask him, do you have knowledge that Jeffrey Epstein is an intelligence asset? Any defense attorney that's worth their salt will tell you that even if you are told that he does belong to intelligence, the answer is always going to be no. Okay? You do not have knowledge. You have been told something secondhand, maybe, or through hearsay. You took some action on the basis of it, but you do not have firsthand personal knowledge. And that's all we get. Denial and plausibility, you know, basically your typical mode of operation here. And so, like, nobody asked, did anyone speak to you at the CIA? Did anyone speak to you at foreign intelligence services overseas? No evidentiary trail at all. No list of who spoke to him about these matters, who he inquired with, where he investigated, what he did exactly. Just like it was this set up to fail, right? Just a typical cleaner move, sweep it under the rug, nothing to see here, folks. Look this way, not that way, right? And then after that, Alex Acosta disappears. Okay. And this is a high profile figure, right? He was like the dean of a major law school, right? A partner at a major law firm, cabinet level secretary. And now he's a ghost. So all of this is happening in the context of what appears to be complete lack of enthusiasm to find any answers. And I mean, you have to go back to the question of, like, how many folks in Trump's world you know, like might be like, is this the reason there's no action? Because there's no appetite to find an answer? I I don't think so. You know, I don't think that's the right way to look at this. I think this is bigger. I think this is bigger, and I for Trump to react the way that he did, either he's really scared of something or he really wants to help keep something covered up. Like that's the only that's the only thing I have for it. You know, because all of these people, Bondi, Bongino, Patel, they didn't show us their process for how they delineate this conclusion. You know, they did all this talk on TV, like lots of talk on TV, claims of documents on their desks, so many files, right? Truckloads of stuff of Jeffrey Epstein's evidence pulling up at the DOJ for Pam Bondi to go through, and that, Cash had to have it there by 8 a.m. that Friday. And they can't show us anything. They can't show us how they come to this conclusion. No. And like, okay, back to Bill Barr for a minute. Quick deviation again. So the origin story of Jeffrey Epstein here is it actually goes back to Bill Barr's father. Okay, it goes back further than Bill Barr. It goes back to his father, um, in a very strange way, actually, because Bill Barr's dad is actually one of the founding members of the CIA. Also important to note. So, if you're going to talk about the nodes of connections between Epstein and the CIA, then we have to go all the way back to a man named Donald Barr, who operated the OSS during World War II, which, of course, is where, the CIA sprung forth from. And then he also became the head of the Dalton School. And he actually hired Jeffrey Epstein, in spite of the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was a failing student and didn't even have a degree himself. He groomed Jeffrey Epstein and connected him then with Ghislaine Maxwell. So it's actually Bill Barr's father who is the who is at the epicenter and the origin of this story. Okay, um, and weirdly enough, the man even wrote a book, and I'll put a picture of it on the screen. Uh, he wrote a book called Space Relations, where a group of elitist pedophiles run an entire planet through blackmail, and it sounds like this movie script, right? And I don't know, it probably is because, I mean, don't we feel like we're in a damn simulation right now? We're in the Matrix or a movie, right? Even Q told us, enjoy the show, watch the movie. Yeah, I'm not enjoying the show anymore. I'm becoming one of the main characters. That's what I'm doing. So, okay. If anything, Donald Barr's book is evidence and proof that we do live in a puppet master controlled matrix, right? If anything. But we're going to figure out how to break out of the matrix. Okay, so Bill Barr's role in this operation. If we're going to talk about connections, then it's going to be very obviously uncomfortable for some people in the Trump world. Let's face it. That's the easiest way I can put that. Because this background story checks out. Okay. So one one of the excuses that was sort of made for the DOJ the first time around, right? Trump's first term. It was like patently obvious that there was a conflict of interest with Bill Barr. Like that the thought process um, we had with like Matt Gaetz or Pam Bondi, that they would be able to get more transparency, right? That was the same perception that we had of Bill Barr in the beginning. Um, we really hoped that he was going to be doing the blocking and the tackling the first time around, right? Um, but let's keep in mind that Epstein actually died on Bill Barr's watch. Um, and also, I mentioned Donald Barr goes back to the very origins of the CIA. Well, Bill Barr started his career in the CIA. And actually, his own biography brags that he told a high school guidance counselor that when he grows up, he wants to be the director of the CIA. Um, Now, of course, he became disenchanted with that back during Jimmy Carter's CIA. His director massively handicapped the CIA back in like 77 and 78 during the Halloween massacre thing. But basically, the CIA was handcuffed for a while after that. They had massive staff reductions, budget cuts, the whole thing. So at that point, Bill Barr had become sort of disenchanted with becoming the head of the CIA and aimed his sights on other things. Okay. Um, so then he went on to become a lawyer and then the head of the Justice Department twice. Um, right, and I think even a man named Terry Reid. Um, I think Terry Reid reported on this back in that era, 80s era under Reagan, um, about Bill Barr's connections with the Iran Contra scandal, and the CIA gun running and the money laundering and the drug running and all of that operation that was going on in the 80s. But at that time, Bill Barr had a code name of Robert Johnson. And if you read, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, he wrote a book on it. Um, I just saw it in my notes. He wrote a book called Compromised, Terry Reid did, which was written very well years before the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing pops off, right? Because it was like in the 90s. And so, again, we've got that same network that's involved with the Epstein stuff, with Epstein himself. But it's a very good book. It explains a lot of this that I'm trying to explain. I'm sorry if I'm not doing a very good job. I'm trying to stay with my notes and deliver this message to you so that you can connect the dots as best as I possibly can. So, okay. As I mentioned, Jeffrey Epstein was involved all the way back into the Iran Contra affair through Adnan um, Kosh, Koshi, however you say his name, and through Continental Air Services, Air America, CIA proprietaries that were used in that operation. Epstein is the one that negotiated all that to come to Columbus, Ohio, right? And so you had an immediate conflict of interest with Bill Barr being the one who comes out to say that Epstein killed himself, right? Um, and then, basically just closed the case, is what he did. He just closed the case. But I mean, what do you expect from the CIA's top mop up man, right? Of course, that's what he's going to do. And if you don't know the background, you don't know the history on Bill Barr or Epstein, then okay, without asking questions and wanting to see transparency and how he arrived at that conclusion, you might just believe he's a good old guy and he's telling 100% the truth, right? Because after all, he was the head of the Justice Department at the time, right? And we're We're supposed to be able to trust those people in those positions. Okay, so let me just take a sip real quick. Okay, I don't know much for example, I mean, Pam Bondi. Okay, I don't even know how I feel about her, to be honest, because if we're going to go back in history and look at where everybody was in their original positions, she was the Attorney General of Florida, and that was the exact jurisdiction of Jeffrey Epstein and where he lived during his career and the state that he was actually prosecuted in. So I don't know about Pam Bondi. I mean, I've never met her. I'm not making any sort of, accusations. I'm just saying, put a pin in that, right? Put a pin in that because we may need that later. And it's important to know where all of these pins belong and where they came from, right? If we're going to ever truly get a full whole picture, we have to know where the pin was to begin with on the board and where it is now and what's happened since then, right? We got to know all the details. Okay? So and I've got a question here. Like why can't we expect from Pam Bondi exactly what Tulsi Gabbard gave us with the JFK files, right? Because I mean that was beautifully executed with very little redaction. Lots and lots of existential information in that. Um, I mean, that should be our gold standard that we hold them all to, because she really. And I mean, granted, there are a few federal um, papers that are still not fully declassified and out to the public yet on JFK, but I mean, thousands of pages, right, of independent files have been released, basically unredacted for the most part, right? Like we know all sorts of information now because of that release. We know about Operation Mongoose and so many other things. Like we understand that the assassination on JFK was a planned event. Like why can't we expect the same from Pam Bondi on the Epstein files and the Epstein network, right? Because that's what we have to keep in mind. This was a network that's still in play. Just because he's gone and Ghislaine is in prison does not mean that this stuff is not still happening on some level. That's the part that should matter to everybody the most. Because at the end of the day and at the beginning of this journey, it's always been about the children. Always. Okay? So we need answers to the criminal side of the Epstein case. We need answers well beyond FBI prosecution or declassification, you know, or the inability to disclose because of court documents that may still be being used in some process or something. We need real answers. The public deserves real answers on all of this. And the victims need real answers and proven elected officials that are definitely in their corner. And the only way we're going to achieve that is through transparency, right? And they're not giving us any of that right now. We're getting snapped at and lectured in the how dare you even ask kind of way by Trump, which really pisses me off. Really pisses me off. So, I mean, the DOJ needs to provide some type of metadata, something that allows independent researchers to build on, what's already known. in order to make their own case of whether or not the DOJ should rightly feel that they have insufficient evidence, to prove beyond a reasonable doubt or whatever. And there hasn't been any attempt to do so. And that is what really bothers me about this, I guess, because they just want to blatantly put it out there and not give us anything and just expect us to not be angry? You expect your base of people to not be angry about this? To not speak out about it? To not ask questions? Mm-mm. It's not good. It's not a good look. Not a good look at all. And I think it's done more damage to the Trump administration with his one snarky statement today than anything his adversaries could have ever thought to do. We can't do the trust me, bro narrative anymore. We can't do the trust the plan narrative. No. We should demand Tulsi Gabbard's gold star standard of releasing the JFK files. That's what we need, right? WikiLeaks style. I don't care. Like, put it out there and let us do the work. We've done it before. We're proven researchers. We're mad bread makers. Put it out there. Let us do it. Let us show you what we can find. I challenge you. Anybody that can do that. Because, I mean, like, nobody has said what they've. Did they pull John Radcliffe in and interview him? Have they interviewed Bill Clinton? Like, we know that he was on the Lolita Express. We know that he went to Epstein's Island numerous times. Why has no one ever brought him in for questioning? Why has no one ever brought anybody that we know definitively was around Epstein in for questioning to find out any and all information we possibly could gather to collect our own client list? Who are they protecting? That's that's what we need answers to. Why are they giving us this smokescreen? Who are they protecting? Not to mention all of Jeffrey Epstein's massive collection of passports that all had different names on them, right? Like to go to other countries under aliases. And those aliases can't even be released. What about all the diamonds that you found and collected as evidence? Where did that go? We can't trace where the diamonds came from. There's no receipts on that. It's funny. It's funny how the DOJ and FBI and CIA is not even being involved in this conversation, really, and they should be. Funny how they have no receipts. They must have a really good cleaner. It's my opinion of it. And we're not asking to see, you know, child predation material. We're not asking you to provide that. So don't even insult us with such comments, Pam Bondi. We don't want you releasing those kind of smutty films, sickening things like that. What a bitch for even saying it. What a bitch. That's not what we're asking for here, and you know it. And for you all to come at us with your snarky comments today, you make me sick. You make me sad for our country because I know the backstory, and you do too. So this is greatly troubling for where we really stand and who you all really are. It's very troubling, maybe even dangerous. Maybe the question is for who? Because this is the kind of stuff that could make people want to go into some kind of crazy ass civil war or something, and we don't want that, do we? We don't want that. So somebody needs to start stepping up and giving us some answers and providing some real transparency here. Because right now, we are feeling utterly betrayed by Donald J. Trump, Pam Bondi, and yeah, even Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, even if they can't help it. And I'll give them some grace that maybe they can't help it. But to think that we're so stupid or naive that we'll just take your blatant response, tuck our tail, and turn around and not ask any more questions for you to have to answer is insulting. It's degrading. And in my opinion, you just treated us like we're deplorable. The very people that put you in your fucking positions. You treated us like we're deplorable. It's awful. It's sick. And it pisses me off. And when we know that you have tens of thousands of hard drives and CDs and images, it might have victims in it, but it also has the buyer. And if you just made your own damn list and then say to us, pick up your piece of paper, right? And name off the list, or not even name it, but say you have the list of people you're going to go after and prosecute after going through all of those videos, CDs, hard drives, etc., that you have a list of perpetrators that you're going to go after and prosecute. We would believe you. We would trust you, and we would not be in this state that our nation is in today. But that's not what you did. That's not what you offered the American people that voted for you, Trump. You broke a big promise today, and you shattered a lot of faith and trust in the plan. Sad day for America. Sad day.